Chapter 41 The Tears of a King. Desperaux found the king in the peas room, sitting on his daughter's chest, clutching the tapestry of her life to his chest. He was weeping, although weeping really is too small a word for the activity that the king had undertaken. Tears were cascading from his eyes. A small puddle had formed at his feet. I'm not exaggerating. The king, it seemed, was intent on crying himself a river. Reader, have you ever seen a king cry? When the powerful are made weak, when they are revealed to be human, to have hearts, their diminishment is nothing short of terrifying. You can be sure that Desperaux was terrified, absolutely, but he spoke up anyway. Sir? The mouse said to the king. But the king did not hear him as Desperaux watched. King Philip dropped the tapestry and took his great gold crown from his lap and used it to beat himself on the chest over and over again. The king, as I have already mentioned, had several faults. He was nearsighted. He made ridiculous, unreasonable, difficult to enforce laws, and much in the way of midgery sow. He was not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer. But there was one extraordinary, wonderful, admirable thing about the king. He was a man who was able and willing to love with the whole of his heart. And just as he had loved the queen with the whole of his heart, so too he loved his daughter with the whole of it, even more than the whole. He loved the Princess P with every particle of his being, and she had been taken from him. But what Desperaux had come to say to the king had to be said, and so he tried again. "Excuse me," he said. He wasn't certain really how a mouse should address a king. Sir did not seem like a big enough word. Desperaux thought about it for a moment. He cleared his throat. He spoke as loudly as he was capable of speaking. "Excuse me, most very honored head person." King Philip stopped beating his crown against his chest and looked around the room. "Down here, most very honored head person," said Desperaux. The king, tears still falling from his eyes, looked at the floor and he squinted. "Is that a bug speaking to me?" he asked. "No," said Desperaux, "I'm a mouse. We met before." "A mouse!" bellowed the king. "A mouse is but one step removed from a rat." "Sir," said Desperaux, "most very honored high person, please, you have to listen to me. This is important. I know where your daughter is." "You do?" said the king, and he sniffed. He blew his nose on his royal cloak. "Where?" he said, and as he bent over to look more closely at Desperaux, one tear, 2 tears, 3 enormous king-sized tears fell with an audible plop onto Desperaux' head and rolled down his back, washing away the white of the flower and revealing his own brown fur. "Sir, most very honored head person, sir," said Desperaux as he wiped the king's tears out of his own eyes. "She's in the dungeon." "Liar," said the king. He sat back up. "I knew it. All rodents are liars and thieves. She's not in the dungeon. My men have searched the dungeon." "But no one really knows the dungeon except the rats, sir. And there are thousands of places where she could be hidden, and only the rats would know. Your men would never be able to find her if the rats did not want her found." "Yeah," said the king, and he clapped his hands over his ears. "Do not speak to me of rats and what they know," he shouted. "Rats are illegal. Rats are against the law. There are no rats in my kingdom. They do not exist." "Sir, most very honored head person, that is not true. Hundreds of rats live in the dungeon of this castle. One of them has taken your daughter, and if you would send—" The king started humming. "I can't hear you," he stopped to shout. "I cannot hear you. And anyway, what you say is wrong, because you're a rodent and therefore a liar." He started humming again, and then he stopped and said, "I have hired fortune tellers and a magician. They are coming from a distant land, and they will tell me where my beautiful daughter is. They will speak the truth. A mouse cannot speak the truth." "I am telling you the truth," said Desperaux. "I promise." But the king would not listen. He sat with his hands over his ears. He hummed loudly. Big, fat tears rolled down his face and fell to the floor. Desperaux sat and stared at him in dismay. What should he do now? He put a nervous paw up to his neck and pulled at the red thread, and suddenly his dream came flooding back to him. The dark and the light, and the knight swinging his sword, and the terrible moment when he had realized that the suit of armor was empty. And then, reader, as he stood before the king, a wonderful, amazing thought occurred to the mouse. What if the suit of armor had been empty for a reason? What if it had been empty because it was waiting for him? You know me, was what the knight in his dream had said. Yes, said Desperaux out loud in wonder, I do know you. I can't hear you, sang the king. I'll have to do it myself, said the mouse. I will be the knight in shining armor. There is no other way. It has to be me. Desperaux turned. He left the weeping king. He went to find the threadmaster. Chapter 42, The Rest of the Thread. The threadmaster was sitting atop his spool of thread, swinging his tail back and forth and eating a piece of celery. Well, look here, he said as he saw Desperaux. Would you just look at that? It's the mouse who loved a human princess. Back from the dungeon in one piece. The old threadmaster say I didn't do my job well because you're still alive. Must have tied the thread incorrectly. But it's not so. And how do I know it's not so? Because the thread's still around your neck. And he nodded and took a bite of his celery. I need the rest of it, said Desperaux. The rest of what? Your neck? The rest of the thread. Well, I can't just hand it over to any old mouse, said the threadmaster. They say red thread is special, sacred. Though I myself, having spent so much time with it, know it for what it is. What is it? Said Desperaux. Thread, said the threadmaster. He shrugged and took another bite of celery. Nothing more, nothing less. But I pretend, friend, I pretend. And what, may I ask, do you intend to do with the thread? Save the princess. Ah, yes, the princess. The beautiful princess. That's how this whole story started, isn't it? I have to save her, and there's no one to do it but me. It seems to me that's the best way to do most things. No one to do the really despicable jobs except oneself. And how exactly will you use a thread, spool of thread, to save a princess? A rat has taken her and hidden her in the dungeon, so I have to go back to the dungeon, and it's full of twists and turns and hidden chambers. Like a maze, said the threadmaster. Yes, like a maze, and I have to find my way to her wherever she's hidden, and then I have to lead her back out again, and the only way I can do that is with the thread. Gregory, the jailer, tied a rope around his ankle so he would not get lost. And as the mouse said this, he shuddered, thinking of Gregory and his broken rope, dying, lost in the darkness. Said Desperaux, I will use thread. The threadmaster nodded. I see, he said. He took a meditative bite of celery. You, friend, are on a quest. I don't know what that is, said Desperaux. You don't have to know. You just have to feel compelled to do a thing. The impossible, important task at hand. Impossible? Said Desperaux. Impossible, said the threadmaster. Important. He sat chewing his celery and staring somewhere past Desperaux, and then suddenly he leapt off his stool. Who am I to stand in the way of a quest, he said. Roll her away. I can have it? Yes, for your quest. Desperaux put his front paws up and touched the spool. He gave it an experimental push forward. Thank you, he said, looking into the eye of the threadmaster. I don't know your name. Hovis. Thank you, Hovis. There's something else, something that belongs with the thread. Hovis went to the corner and came back with a needle. You can use it for protection. Like a sword, said Desperaux. Like a knight would have. Yes, said Hovis, and he gnawed off a length of thread and used it to tie the needle around Despereaux's waist, like so. Thank you, Hovis, said Desperaux, and he put out his right shoulder against the spool of thread and pushed it forward again. Wait, said Hovis. He stood up on his hind legs, put his paws on Despereaux's shoulder, and leaned in close to him. Desperaux smelled the sharp, clean scent of celery as the threadmaster bent his head, took hold of the thread but round Despereaux's neck in his sharp teeth, and pulled on it hard. There, said Hovis, when the piece of thread broke and dropped to the ground. Now you're free. You see, you're not going into the dungeon because you have to. You're going because you choose to. Yes, said Desperaux, because I am on a quest. The word felt good and right in his mouth. Quest. Say it, reader. Say the word quest out loud. It is an extraordinary word, isn't it? So small, and yet so full of wonder, so full of hope. Goodbye, said Hovis to Desperaux, as he pushed the spool of thread out of the threadmaster's hole. I have never known a mouse who made it out of the dungeon only to go back into it again. Goodbye, friend. Goodbye, mouse among mice. And that is the end of our chapter. And here is Desperaux and Hovis, and the spool of thread and the needle. Until next time.